Yo, I asked myself the other day, like, what is in me that is resolved, that is unresolved emotionally? Yo, I just had some shit come up. Like, you know how you be having them aha moments? I realized, like, before I speak on society or humanity, I'm like, yo, I realize a lot of people in my lineage, when you think about people who stay in their hometown a lot, will never have want to expand beyond that, I realize they have a fear of being seen, or they were around people who kept them silent because of the fear of being seen. Because people have kept them small for so long, so they feel that they need to be small, but not to be bigger than what they're supposed to be. I had to acknowledge it a minute ago that like, bro, I did, like, you know how some people grow up in the church. I rebuke or renounce the fear of being seen, especially when you walk in authenticity and your truth. I was like, what the fuck? What is my fear of being seen around, and what is it centered? And I'm like, yo. And I was like, what is this stemming from? And as I've said before, a lot of things don't even come from us. A lot of things stem from dealing with a lot of unresolved things, where a lot of our ancestors or people that came before us, I wouldn't necessarily say they had a fear of being seen, but what I realize it's rooted in, has a lot to do with the stigma around being themselves, and also the pressure around them just being, even let's say someone that's darker in a country or a climate where they were frowned upon, whether in their family, for speaking the truth, for being their authentic self, or even just the energy around where a lot of our ancestors, when they try to fulfill something, the lack of support or genuine support from people who either gate kept things from them, you know, your gatekeepers, or even the fact of how people will blackmail them, backhand them on certain things, or false promises. Man, there's so much shit around things that are unhealed when we're dealing with a lot of things that, you know, that can no longer be like hidden, bro. I was like, bro, fear of being seen? That makes a lot of sense. Like, so again, collectively, we're talking about things where people who grandparents or great-grandparents never got the opportunity to feel like they were worthy of being seen. And it's not so much to the masses or to the world. It's like, if I ask you this, or you ask yourself, like, hey, am I worthy of being seen? Do I see myself? Do I see me? And then how do I see me? Do I see me in a healthy way? Do I see me in a way where I'm not afraid to see myself? Because I feel like in the sense of not being afraid to see yourself, you're not concerned about who sees you, whether only physically but also spiritually. You're not concerned about how people see you. And that's one of the biggest things that I had to learn with rebuilding my confidence. It's like the fear of being seen or coming out, and not being so focused on being so focused on my image. And that's something I gradually, when I realized from the experiences I had with parents or certain people, I realized, like, whoa, is this mine? Or is this something that I need to transmute? Is this something I need to acknowledge, to realize, like, this doesn't belong to me? Because I'm not a fearful person. I've always been fearless. So I recognize, like, okay, these things that's coming up has nothing to do with me, but I need to be aware that how can I acknowledge this, and how could I work through or navigate through it? So I'm recognizing, like, oh shit, this don't belong to me. This does not belong to me. And was it someone before, when I realized, like, as I was cutting ties with people before, I realized, like, let's say, for example, I was in a connection where I was expressing to someone, like, the where I've been in a connection where once you start to show your gifts, and a lot of us don't realize, like, I became more self-aware and more secure in my expressing my gifts authentically, whether it's speaking, whether it's my artistry and so forth, because I did not come here to be afraid of being seen. And then where does it stem from? You know, what is it rooted in? And I asked myself, I'm like, where is it stemming from? And that's why I always tell people, resistance a lot of the times come deeper than just physical. It's DNA, it's ancestral, it's spiritual, where a lot of ancestors could have feared, you know, at a time where things are different now, the climate is different, but it's also being, with walking a healing journey or a spiritual path, it's an awareness also around that, the caution, not fear, but the being mindful on a said journey, because not everyone and everything is for your betterment if you're not aware or have discernment. So my discernment was always on point, or even my just intuition, as it grew, as I start to see more of myself, as I start to evolve, I start to recognize, like, wow, this person was in competition with me the whole time. And then it would bring up emotions. I would be angry, but I realized, like, this had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with them. So I was like, wow, that fear of being seen had a lot to do with the fact of, when I did, you know, anyone who's been seeing what I do and following me with my my artistry, I always knew from my natural gifts and abilities that, you know, on a grander scale or universal scale, even in this world, whatever, it was always instilled in me to be amazing and great, and you know, now seeing more of how clear, you know, as a smoke and mirrors clear, or as a smoke clears, how you you come to the awareness, like, what is really aligned with you and your purpose, and it becomes more easy, but also more responsibility you have to have behind said gifts, said approach, the awareness on even the discernment that has to go into who you connect with. And it's not to say not to have fun and enjoy life. It's just to whom is given, much is required. You know, and that goes with everything. Too much of anything can be, you know, poison to some people, if not all. But other than that, yeah, I was like, yo, I was sitting here and start to confess to myself, like, what is in me that's unresolved? And when I say what is in me, it's also what's in we as in those who came before me. What am I, like, not seeing? What do I need to be revealed to me so I can, you know, live more of a harmonious and prosperous life, instead of ignoring, you know, the truths about what was taught to me, or what was given to me to keep me in such a stagnant place. You know, what comes with that is moving away from smaller towns, or a town where the energy is stagnant, a place where you're called to rise above adversities. You're called to break generational curses and patterns, because simply you are the one to do that. No one else is sent there to do that. And so that's the beauty of accepting the black sheep role, or that title, or the generational curse breaker, or the cycle breaker, because you become more aware, like, yo, at a moment, this shit was very, like, challenging and difficult. But you're not only navigating and, you know, having to integrate your own emotions. You're talking about, on my previous video that I'm uploading, how, you know, I'm speaking about, we're coming from unresolved traumas and things passed on us from baby boomers, from people that's not even 100 years ago, if that makes sense, because we're talking about behavior patterns where, you know, let's say someone who was in a military setting, or someone who was in a setting where they had to deal with a grandmother, grandfather having to migrate, you know, go through wars, or they was on the other side of the war, or never wanting to engage with it, but somehow got caught in the gunfire. So And that's the thing where a lot of people don't, we're unaware of, but becoming more aware of. When I look at breaking generational curses, I look at the war and being caught in the gunfire from the generations before and the generations after, if that makes sense. That means like the resistance of me trying to change and evolve, and the resistance of those who did not have the opportunity. That's just like saying like the family you grew up in could be sometimes your first enemy simply because they're not willing to evolve. So they're individually on a spiritual level or soul level, they individually got to deal with their own shit outside of the fact of they cannot accept that or won't accept that they're here to support you, or you're here to support them in whichever way and how that looks. But a lot of people get caught up in the distractions of it got to be a certain way, or I'm the only one that can eat in this table. And in reality, like, we all are supposed to eat at this table, but you have those people who have their own vices, who have their own spiritual warfare internally, who also, even though my mom and dad came together, let's say my aunt, which came from my grandmother, my mom came from the same mother, they came from the same mother, but they did not have a baby by the same man. So what we're dealing with here on other levels, we're talking about, let's say my aunt had, she did have her kids by other men, right? And so another man, and so I'm just giving this analogy or an example. Okay, so her vices will not be the same with my mom's dealing with. Not only with my mom, and I'm breaking this down ancestrally, like we're talking about generational things. My mom will have to deal with not only what repressed emotions or memories and so forth from her mom, but what did her mom have unfinished? What did her mom experience and so forth? So you're talking about things from where generations of women who did not have the opportunity to even have a safe place for themselves internally, who did not get an opportunity to express how they felt because they had to work vigorous hours, walk long distance, or whatever they had to do to put food on a table without any excuses, because there wasn't a supporting cast, there wasn't a supporting system. So then you got my mom, again, if my grandmother, whatever she dealt with was unresolved, or her mom didn't have the best relationship, okay, now you're seeing it play out through their relationship. So it all makes sense. So now here it is, present day, my aunt, whatever relationship, which I learned young that my sisters and my mom and her my aunt didn't have the best relationship. And you gotta realize, like, that reflects the mother, and then that reflects her relationship with her mother or her sisters. We're seeing energy play out, we're seeing like behavior patterns play out. And again, whoever she had a child by, you're talking about, my vices are not the same patriarchally that comes with another man who comes from a whole nother generation or a whole nother lineage. So do y'all see exactly like the bigger picture where, this person could have grew up in money. My people could have came through a lineage of poverty just for me to come here, and then to illuminate that, to completely do things differently so that our lineage can prosper in a more in a different way, wealth-wise, whether that's mentally, emotionally, financially, and so forth. Other than someone who still may have vices, but that's none of my business because I'm not in connection with them, or how the world emphasizes how so much shit is pushed to the media, how we need to be so focused on someone else's life but our fucking own, which is wild. So again, the world has shown us like the importance of like to be steered away from what we need to focus on more of ourselves, rather than getting to know more of ourselves. And again, going back to the fear of being seen, bro. What if the fact of the fear of being seen has a lot to do with the fact of us running from our traumas, or us running from the very things we need to see within ourselves? What is that? What if that is rooted in the fear of being seen? And I was like, wow. When I look at that, I am first generation, like when it comes to, as I know of, because I'm sure there was probably people who came before me who did great things and grand things, or on other different scales, who, but what I'm mentioning is like entrepreneurship or going into things where I prioritize my well-being, because I did not see that growing up, or, trying to change that narrative now has a lot to why, it takes a lot of consistency with that. Because when I say resistance, there wasn't a lot of ancestors who would think that this was okay. A lot of people would be against that. A lot of people would be against the fact of, like, why aren't you out there working? You're lazy. Why aren't you out there doing that? And by me integrating those lessons and that trauma and so forth, and trying to transmute it and alchemize it, that's just no difference than your present day relatives or present day friends or whomever, who may not know what it is for you to regulate, those emotions during those trying times, or trying to learn something new, or expand, or know what it is, the vision that you have or were given. So with that, it's like, that's why, I'm recognizing, okay, where does this fear of being seen stem from? So again, when you look at your circumstances, where do you think that begins? And where do you think is rooted in? Whether your experience with a mother or father, and then once you start to branch out and you realize that life is much more bigger on a grander scale, then not just the fear of being seen, but I deserve to be seen. My gifts deserve to be witnessed to the world. There are ancestors that, and I always tell y'all, all ancestors and people that came before you were not supportive of you wanting to elevate the fucking lineage. And the reason I say that, again, family, you got the same people holding that same energy right now. They breadcrumb you. They don't want to support you. They carry that same energy in your lineage. And not to mention, there are other people out here too who just want to, energy vampires, or just want to get close to you, just simply because you're learning now that they could never swap destinies with you. They could never do what you do. They can try to copy, but they can never duplicate. So even the energy around that says a lot, to where it doesn't matter who does what, and even if it looks the same, no one does it like you. And that's the beauty of even how energy doesn't die, or it moves on. And so that's what we're realizing for a lot of us, is self-realization. Like, if I couldn't be the only one in my lineage that wanted to share these gifts with the world, as I start to learn more about how certain relatives have gifts, whether on my patriarchal or matriarchal side. So guess what you have? You have gifts from both patriarchal and matriarchal. When you look at your matriarchal side, when you see what your mother is great at, and then when you also see what people are stagnant at, you will begin to recognize that this is something that you are being guided to master. But again, another big thing is where I recognize is that a lot of us didn't grow up in guidance. We weren't guided to honor our emotions. We wasn't guided to be inspiration. We wasn't guided after we made certain so-called mistakes to see the greatness or the beauty within ourselves. We wasn't guided to do that. So then that's when we start to cling and codependently be connected to relationships, or hold on to things that were not very beneficial to our evolution. So again, it's the beauty of this is like knowing this now. Ooh, it done got a little hot. Knowing this now, I start to become aware, like, oh my gosh, a lot of us grew up in fucking fear templates. A lot of us grew up in fearful foundations. Imagine, like, when you say, like, I dealt with abandonment issues emotionally, mentally, and so forth, right? So then you will see me seeing relationships where people fear leaving unhealthy relationships because of what they consistently saw growing up. So their fear would be being alone. A lot of us have a fear of not just being alone, because that fear, on the other side of that fear, is facing yourself. It's being able to see you, so you will be able to see why you're so fearful of being seen or to be experienced. Because love And authenticity is to be experienced. We all are here to be experienced. And that's what a lot of our mothers and fathers, due to their own subconscious fears, smothered us or hovered over us or projected fear onto us, so that we didn't live a sovereign life, so that we didn't live a more prosperous or harmonious life, or a life where we only had to just be around them, or we only had to stay within the same town, or we only had to do what they did, because a lot of their foundations within is about fear, not guidance, not guiding us to be the best versions of ourselves. But now a lot of us are realizing, I come to the self-awareness, we're having to face the fears of unresolved memories and emotions. We're things that are coming up in our being right now has a lot to do with subconscious fears. Fears around mama's abandonment, daddy's abandonment, mama's instability, fears around her being stable outside of a Section 8 or governmental assistance. Fear of, I had to say on my previous video, I dealt with personally, like the fear of being on my own, or like gaining, getting a place, a home, property, or whatever it is on my own. Not on my own by myself, but it was like being there. Like the fear, a lot of us are breaking generational curses dealing with the fear, because of so much of us have been in so much of a codependency outside of others' belief systems and their fear, because of what they dealt with demographically, because a lot of them were in demographics where they were pressured into never leave here, boy, dealing with self-hatred from other cultures. Don't leave here, don't come outside of this town, or don't let me catch you over there. So a lot of our grandfathers, great-grandmothers, and a lot of them, guess what? They develop a fucking fear. And guess what? Guess what you see in society? The fear-mongering, the fear around, do not, how dare you step outside of that county line? How dare you go outside of that, do this and do that? How dare you step outside of, being what we wanted you to be? And that's why a lot of us get attacked by a lot of, people who don't know how to be themselves. Their insecurities become very loud. And that's why I realized, like, what I came to the self-realization, what a lot of my mother fear, especially mother wound, where I realized, like, the enmeshment relationships, or the emotional incest that a lot of mothers and fathers have with their kids, is because it's a fear that it brings up a fear of abandonment within them, because they don't know how to be with themselves, because they don't know how to nurture and parent themselves. So their fears come up around that, and that's where their unhealthy attachment is to you. They fear you leaving outside of town, or leaving or traveling somewhere, because it will bring up things within them that they never had to sit with, because their mothers and fathers taught them the very same thing. So they want you to live out the very same thing. They want you to live out the very same pattern. And if you don't, some of you can be disowned, some of you can be considered a black sheep, some of you can be, everything but a child of the Most High. And that's what I realized. Like, a lot of these fears have nothing to do with us. A lot of these fears and this resistance are very ancestral. A lot of things are very dealing with the lineage. A lot of things have nothing to do with you. So that one right there, let me emphasize more on. When you're talking about a lot of our great grandparents and so forth, depending on their generation, that had to stay in towns, that were forced into towns, or forced in, the hood, because of the fear of, predominantly, I see now, while a lot of these places are predominantly melanated, because them being forced through captivity, depending on that, or them being outnumbered, due to, like, the presence of people who are associated with a KKK, or associated with things where they have a self-hatred towards dark people, or they have more resources. So, I can see why certain people would be starved They won't give them the food. I can see why a lot of people will be, when it comes to resources, whether it's monetary, money, starving them of certain resources so they don't prosper beyond where they are. Starving them of certain informations where you hide the informations of who they truly are. So they keep them in that stagnant and fearful place that the fear of certain people, these people come into this awareness of they're greater than what they've been told, what they've seen. They're greater than their circumstances. So yeah. And so a lot of y'all don't realize, like, a lot of us are here to break that fucking generational pattern of the thinking, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, to evolve not only us, our lineage, but also the ones that come after us. Because once we start to realize how much we've been lied to and how much we lie to ourselves, there is no fear around being seen. Because it's all been bullshit, spells, illusions, and all that. And now that the veil is thin, it's like, what? No stone should go unturned. And so the beauty of all of this is, like, a lot of your fears aren't even yours. It's just what was passed down. That's a behavior pattern. That's something, cognitive. That's something psychological. Even the fear around people believing, like think about this. Imagine if a lot of you was never given a basketball or football, but you were encouraged to see so much of the limitlessness of how and what you can do in this world on so many levels. There's a fear in that when the powers that ain't or used to be. That was the greatest fear. Then you got other people who have bribed and bought into this narrative of literally believing like a people aren't better than what they look like. Just because of what they look like, that don't mean they're less valuable. Or because of their class, they're less valuable. So a lot of these people's subconscious fear, depending on who it is and their perspective and their belief systems, their internal belief systems, their fears are becoming their worst nightmares now. Yes. So for a lot of you, I told you, some people's, your karma for other people, or some of us are karma for our fucking lineage. Y'all don't even know that. Like, bro, I realize a lot of us are karma coming back around, and that's all karma is. A lot of us are karma for our lineage. For ones who didn't want to do it, we're showing up right now in present day to do it, and to do it even better. So that's why a lot of people are piss poor morally, because we're not, the karma. And when we learn those lessons of karma, we are dharma for the generation after. Research what it means. We are dharma. We experience dharma, but we're also, we get to experience that dharma with the generation after. And that would be the youth, and that would be your own kids. Because again, a lot of us wasn't guided. And those who are in tune spiritually know that we're being guided by, ancestors or something greater. And that's when we more in tune, we become guided by something else. Because it's like it was written. We knew that, let's say, like the divine or source knew that who you were assigned to, your lineage and so forth. They knew fucking well that your mother or father or whomever it was, they were parents. They wasn't guardians. Let's just say that. They were supposed to be guardians. And that's why I knew deep down my mother always knew what I was here to do. And with that, she had a responsibility, just as your mother, your father. And it all depends on if your mother and father like transitioned early or, left this world a little early. I get that. But even the next person to that, they still had a responsibility. And then for some of us, we had to parent or be guardians for ourselves, or even have guides on the other side, spirit guides, ancestors, And that's what, if you want to learn more about what really, a lot of the spiritual community, where you're seeing almost like a cleanse of that shit for those who are in that atmosphere of that, or in that realm of that. A lot of you have been, due to a lot of selfishness or self-righteousness, they haven't guided you as well. There's been very few. who are guides, who are in tune, who are also given and were initiated, but at the same time, not for the greater good. Because you also have a physical family or tribe, whatever you want to call it, but you also have people here too who had a responsibility when it comes to upholding spiritual duties. Let's just say that. Your mother and father didn't just have duties and responsibility. There are people here in the spiritual communities also as well who are a part of the evolution of not only the physical but also the spiritual community as well. No one is exempt. Well, I tell y'all, from karma. Because people knew that there would always be new teachers, new spiritualists, new people come along, new leaders and so forth. And people had the opportunity to be responsible with the said gifts. And this is why it goes back to gatekeeping. Because a lot of people feared in the spiritual communities and so forth, they fear, their greatest fear also too, because they're not exempt. Their greatest fear was also, because they gatekept a lot of shit, their greatest fear was people to become bigger than them on this physical plane. And it's not to say they had spiritual rank. You got people who have spiritual rank, but at the same time, they also abuse their power. Because a lot of people gatekept. They talk really good. They're very persuasive. You know, you got both women and men operating with certain forces and so forth who did not uphold their duties. They're not bigger than the fucking program either. And no matter your mama, daddy, your family, no one's bigger than the program. That's what I'm here to remind y'all. So when I'm talking about this fear thing, I'm talking about the fact of how there are people who have spiritual initiations or been spiritually initiated and use their titles also to fearmonger, to abuse the masses, to abuse people. That's what they do for self-righteous reasons, and it's because of what they've been consumed by. They can show up as light, they can show up as dark, they can show up as whatever it is they want to, but at the same time, no one's exempt from the bigger picture here. So that's why, again, a lot of those who did come along, who were on their mission, a lot of those people who, let's just say this for my spiritual community, a lot of them people had their hand in shit too, who knew certain people who would come along and they can foresee it, or they were tuned in and they knew that a certain person had a calling on their life. And if people couldn't physically get to them, there are people who were spiritually initiative, or, whatever terms y'all want to use, they also would tap into or try to reach those other people spiritually. And being that, let's say a leader came on of a high ranking in the spiritual and was supposed to be something greater here, this is where you will see a lot of unaliving with certain leaders or certain people that will come along who had a greater gift or who had a greater message for the masses. But, again, someone spiritually who knew. Because there is something new above the sun, let's just say that. But at the same moment, you hear people say there's nothing new under the sun. But there is something new at the same moment. This is what the beauty of divine protection is right about now for a lot of us, because this is what a lot of the healers are in power now. And the reason why I say the healers, because you had to be wounded to be a healer. So people would think a healer will come along and look up a certain way, a certain image, a certain complex, or whatever it is, and touch people and do this and do that. And in reality, the greater picture is that every great person, or let's say persons who are coming here to I don't like to use the term awaken, but to bring forth something greater, was that of a guide, and a guide back to self, not a guide away from, you believing in something more externally. No, a guide to self. So that's the thing where I can hear people talking about, they put so much emphasis on this leader or this particular person, and in reality, you're just as valuable as that fucking leader. So where's all this praise and where's all this shit coming from? That's what y'all been bamboozled and fooled to believe in. And also fear mongering and to believe in. All that, a lot of that shit that's crumbling right now, and dealing with a lot of the old world narrative that's crumbling, is a lot of fear and control and narcissistic shit. A lot of your leaders or whomever, a lot of them carried that same energy of the old world. And a lot of us were here to integrate it, transmute it, and alchemize it to be and show and be a guide for the generation after and generations after us. Because some of y'all have already accepted your fate. A lot of you haven't even embraced or afraid to see yourself. Because with seeing yourself, the divine will show you the shit that you don't want to see. The parts of you that you're afraid of, the parts of you that come with your lineage, the versions of you that you start to realize is beyond color. Because a lot of people of darker shade had their hand in captivity. A lot of people of lighter shade had their hand in liberating people that were darker, in reversing the roles. So beyond that, it's the energy that was carried through generations. So as much as you think you just giving leaders that don't look like you or a lighter shade, as much as there's other people around the world who eventually y'all will see who also had their hand in shit, who've always had. So that's what's being, again, it plays on your mind and subconscious. Like the jig is up. And a lot of us already know that these are very celebratory moments because a lot of us get to live out. There are ancestors before us that are so celebratory because we did not shut the fuck up, because they were silenced when they spoke up. There are ancestors that are clapping on the other side that we did step outside of our hometowns, because guess what? There were things that were sent to destroy us, or purposely people of different shades or whatever, to try to keep us from walking in the very purpose that we are now. There are ancestors in gratitude of a number that you can't even count, because we are here now choosing to elevate, to see beyond monetary, to see the spiritual significance in what we're really doing and who comes after us. The beauty in that, of becoming an ancestor and not fearing death, because that is a transition that happens to everyone. And that's why a lot of house structures were built, whether medically and so forth, to keep the father out. Because a lot of the fathers don't realize, because y'all don't realize a lot of that pain and being away from a lot of your kids when you were a part of wars that did not involve you, but you were forced, or through fear or whatever it is, it was purposely done just for this moment. Because a lot of you never saw your children come through the womb, and you will have a different perspective on life. You will see your women, you will see life in itself completely different. You will see what y'all call death as a transition, as something comes in the cycle of life that comes through and goes again and again. So the beauty of that is, like, what are we dealing with here? So it goes back to even the fact of, you're dealing with grandfathers and great-grandfathers who had to be away from their families, who dealt with separation anxiety, separation trauma, grandmothers and dealt with separation. And so guess what her greatest fear was? Through that, she gained unconsciously gained an unhealthy attachment to her kids, because she had a father when she didn't even want to. She had to become through her distorted motherhood, not purposely, it was intentionally and divinely orchestrated, but she had to do that purposely for what? For now. Because even though they transitions, I'm trying to tell y'all, a lot of our great grandmothers and ancestors and so forth, who knew they had to do what they had to do, who had to make those sacrifices, they are clapping on the other side. They are looking at a lot of us and they are empowering us. They are covering us. They are clearing our energy. They are protecting us. They are reminding us from the other side that we are safe, that we're divinely guided and protected in all walks of life, because that's what the matriarchal, the divine mother, is returning, and the divine father. That represents the wounds of the unresolved memories and emotions from those mothers and fathers who did not have the opportunity to speak, who did not have the opportunity to share those memories with us, who did not have the opportunity to express their emotions. So those repressed emotions and memories lingers in the soil. Some of them didn't leave this world in peace. So their greatest fear was for their kids to not have peace on earth. So I keep reminding y'all, if y'all think that the energy of these places and so forth, why you see these fucking women angry and have so much rage, because the rage ain't just theirs. The rage are their grandmothers and great grandmothers and so forth. That rage is ancestral. So how dare anyone come tell me I shouldn't be angry or have rage or honor my emotions when I had grandfathers at a time on this earth plane who did not have the opportunity to express themselves because they were unalive either by their color or they were backstabbed by someone who looked like them because they feared or wanted to swap destinies or wanted their life. So how dare y'all? And that's for a lot of you. So again, it goes the same for even men. When our mothers are taught to simply repress this shit, the divine mother, when I tell y'all the divine mother is pissed, and when I keep telling y'all, get out of the way, because you know when Big Mama show up, when the energy of a mother show up, and you fucking with her, when you fucking with her cubs, and you fucking with like the energy of a lioness, that Sekhmet energy, all those energies of those women whose stories were untold, who had rage that they never got out, emotions that they never expressed. If you think for one moment that we don't carry that shit in our DNA, this is why I keep empowering our women. Y'all need to realize that you're carrying rage, emotions, unrepressed emotions, suppressed emotions for generations. And you can't make sense of why the fuck you so angry. Why the fuck you can't get it right? It ain't even about being right. Why your emotions are all over the place? Because girl, throughout generations, you have integrated things. You have things within you that they are waiting for you to find out about who you are, your lineage, your magic, your power. Because everything began with y'all. And the only way this shit is going to shift comes a lot with you as mothers realizing what you have enabled, what you have supported, what you have continuously allowed. I speak so confidently because guess what? I knew I had to go through what I had to go through just to realize what I was being protected by and from. And it's even more so like, it's so deep, it's like even when women don't recognize their power, they're unconsciously being against the man, being against their sons, being against themselves. When you are against yourself and you don't choose to heal or acknowledge things within you, love, beloved, love, sis, you are unconsciously like not giving a fuck about the foundations of yourself and your generation, and also even the ones after you. So a lot of you don't realize like your avoidance of therapy or your avoidance of, conflict avoidance or your passive aggressiveness. You don't realize like our mothers and great grandmothers, especially darker women in this country, certain women, they were forced to be passive aggressive. They had to be passive aggressive to put food on the table. Till it got to y'all. For a lot of you, it came to y'all. And that's why you're tired. That's why your body, you're exhausted beyond measures. That's why you're not able to go do certain things anymore. Because you know why? They want you to sit the fuck down and realize like, no, listen, you come from something way more bigger and larger. And I'm just a reminder. So again, those fears are not even just yours. They want you to go beyond those fears. They want you to expand beyond that. They want you to face yourself. They want you to see the things that mama and grandma kept in for so long. So you can liberate yourself and liberate them. Because a lot of y'all keep trying to tell y'all, a lot of those ancestors did not leave this world in peace. And what I mean by that, a lot of them didn't even leave with a regulated nervous system. A lot of them didn't even leave, they had so many unfulfilled dreams, unfulfilled, they didn't get fulfilled a lot of things because they had to sacrifice. And the beauty of this is starting where they couldn't. That's my reminder. Start where they couldn't. And you're already doing it, even when you're not aware of it. So I love you. I appreciate you. I value you. Peace and blessing. Shalom.